In October 2023, beneath the overgrown ruins of a Luftwaffe installation near Kassel, Germany, a drilling crew struck metal where the ground should have been solid limestone. What they found was not a bomb shelter or ammunition cache, but a reinforced steel door welded shut and sealed under 6 meters of concrete. Within days, the site was cordoned off under federal supervision. Radiation counters registered faint anomalies. When the door was finally cut open, the air that escaped was dry, metallic, untouched since 1945. On the wall above the entrance, a single word was stenciled in fading white paint: Eclipse. The lost vault of a forgotten operation had resurfaced, and with it, questions that the post-war world had quietly chosen to bury. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Vault of Operation Eclipse. The excavation began under a veil of silence. Officially, the discovery outside Kassel was logged as a historical preservation survey under Bundesarchiv supervision. Unofficially, the Bundesnachrichtendienst, Germany's federal intelligence service, had taken command of the perimeter within 24 hours. A tent city of forensic analysts, geologists, and military historians soon rose over the site. Satellite imagery of the coordinates 54D 42 N 9D T9 T9 13E was quietly blurred on public databases by order of the Federal Ministry of Defense. The vault was buried beneath a secondary structure built over the remains of an air defense complex once managed by Luftflotte 3. No record of a sublevel existed in architectural blueprints recovered from regional archives. What lay beneath had been erased long before the surrender of 1945. The first entry into the vault was recorded on video at 0412 local time. The steel door, cut open by acetylene torches, revealed a narrow corridor lined with frost-covered concrete. German and English warning labels painted in black stenciled script read, Hochspannung, keep clear. The air inside was stagnant, metallic, and abnormally dry, preserved by decades of isolation. A generator was found on a suspended platform, its fuel tank empty but intact. The deeper they went, the more deliberate the construction appeared. At the corridor's end stood a secondary bulkhead bearing the emblem of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, partially obscured by corrosion. It was the first tangible confirmation that Operation Eclipse, a codename rumored in post-war intelligence chatter, had been real. Inside the main chamber lay 6 wooden crates, each stamped with the abbreviation OKW restricted and sealed with wax imprints of the Reichsadler. The contents, once catalogued, would send ripples through both historical and scientific communities. Inside were fragments of instrumentation, gyroscopic assemblies, vacuum tubes, and what appeared to be early transistor prototypes, none matching known German or Allied designs from the era. Beside them were tightly rolled technical blueprints labeled Projektführung, Inge K. Weidemann, 1944. The schematics depicted what could only be described as an autonomous flight control system, a mechanical autopilot decades ahead of its time. But even more perplexing were the marginal notes written in English, using American engineering notation, suggesting transnational collaboration that had never been documented. Over the next weeks, restoration teams meticulously catalogued the items under the designation Vault 17 Eclipse. Forensic metallurgists at the Fraunhofer Institute were brought in to analyze their alloy compositions. The results were baffling. Traces of tungsten, molybdenum, and a synthetic polymer unknown to 1940s chemistry. The microstructural pattern resembled post-1960 aerospace composites. The findings were quietly classified as temporally inconsistent, pending further verification. Yet in the fragments of Weidemann's notes, references appeared to a parallel study at Facility K-12 under Allied oversight. No such facility had ever been acknowledged. The deeper the team delved, the more the narrative of wartime technology blurred into something far larger, an intersection between defeated science and the victors who may have appropriated it. One of the recovered film reels was labeled Aufnahme 47 Trials, Kassel, März 1945. It showed indistinct footage of what appeared to be a test chamber. In it, engineers stood before a suspended fuselage segment equipped with cylindrical instruments along its wings. The footage cut abruptly before ignition. Chemical analysis of the film stock confirmed it was produced in 1944 at the Agfa Wulfen plant. Yet the sound recorded on the accompanying wire spool was unmistakably English, an American voice counting down to launch. When cross-referenced with known Allied operations, the closest match was Project Lusty, the US Air Technical Intelligence Initiative that seized German aeronautical assets after the war. But Lusty's archives contained no mention of Eclipse. Someone had erased it deliberately. By mid-November, rumors of the Castle Vault had reached investigative journalists through leaked correspondence within the Federal Archives. The story broke briefly online under the headline, "Nazi Vault Unearthed in Germany Contains Unknown Technology." Within hours, it was taken down. Sources later confirmed that the Federal Press Office issued a suppression order citing national security implications. The story, however, had already spread through encrypted academic circles. Independent historians from the University of Munich and MIT began privately comparing notes. One of them, Dr. Lucas Heinen, published a paper under pseudonym A. Richter, suggesting that the Eclipse materials matched declassified fragments of Operation Overcast, the precursor to Paperclip. If true, it implied American agents may have accessed the Castle Vault before it was buried. To test this hypothesis, Heinen obtained a 1946 US Army report labeled Subject German Technical Sites, Refer File 3817B, Attic. Within it, he found a brief notation, Eclipse, unrecoverable, assets neutralized, liaison, Cole W. Donovan, OSS. The name was unmistakable, William J. Donovan, founder of the Office of Strategic Services. The implication was devastating. The Allies had known of the site, possibly looted its contents, and then sealed it beneath layers of bureaucracy and concrete. In early 1946, regional construction records confirmed Allied engineers had requisitioned materials for subterranean demolition under classified supervision. The vault had not simply been abandoned, it had been entombed. The modern discovery ignited a quiet race within intelligence and academic circles. The Bundesarchiv sought to retain control over the materials, but the United States and the United Kingdom both filed formal requests under historical restitution treaties, claiming joint interest in any technology derived from Allied operations. Behind closed doors, officials debated jurisdiction, while private contractors began discreetly scanning every fragment retrieved. One digital reconstruction of a blueprint revealed the notation MK6 Guidance Array, revised June 1945. That same designation later appeared in early CIA documents concerning unmanned reconnaissance aircraft prototypes in 1952. The lineage was undeniable. Operation Eclipse had not ended with Germany's defeat. It had been absorbed, renamed, and weaponized in the shadows of the Cold War. By December 2023, the excavation site was sealed again, officially due to environmental contamination. Access was revoked for all civilian researchers. Those who had handled the Eclipse materials signed non-disclosure agreements under penalty of national security violations, yet a handful of images had already leaked. A rusted crate bearing the Eagle insignia, a scorched blueprint labeled MK6, and a fragment of a control gyroscope placed on a steel table under floodlights. For those who had seen them, the realization was chilling. The post-war technological revolution, the jet age, guided missiles, even the earliest computers, might trace its ancestry not to open innovation, but to a buried room in Kassel and the minds who perished with it. When the final forensic report was quietly filed under Case ID GER 2023-745 ECL, it contained an unusual closing statement from the lead investigator, Major Eric Kessler. Recovered materials exhibit design principles inconsistent with any known 1940s standard. It is the conclusion of this team that Operation Eclipse represented a transitional phase of scientific transfer between wartime Germany and post-war Allied intelligence. Evidence suggests intentional concealment. The report was stamped, classified, and archived under restricted access. Weeks later, Kessler resigned from service without explanation. Today, the official line remains unchanged. The Kassel discovery was a wartime storage bunker, nothing more. But those who were there recall the silence that followed the vault's opening, the dry hiss of escaping air, the first beam of light cutting through 78 years of darkness, and the feeling that something had been waiting inside, undisturbed but not forgotten. In the dim reflection of corroded metal, history had stared back, daring the modern world to confront the price of its own progress. Chapter 2: The Black Archive of Colomar Station. When the satellite photographs first surfaced in 2018, few paid attention. The images, captured by an independent climate monitoring array over Russia's Magadan Oblast, showed irregular depressions in the permafrost. Geometric, angular, unnatural. A pattern of rectangles forming the faint outline of what looked like buried infrastructure. The coordinates 60°4009N 151°0231E placed it deep within the Kolyma region, once the heart of Stalin's Gulag network. For decades, the area had been closed to civilian access. When Russian geologists petitioned for an exploratory permit, citing permafrost instability, the Ministry of Natural Resources quietly approved it. 3 months later, the first drilling unit breached the frozen layer and struck reinforced concrete. Embedded within the ice were steel plates marked in Cyrillic. Object 74 Delta. Object 74 to Delta. What they found beneath would unravel one of the Cold War's most suppressed medical experiments. Initial documentation dated the facility's construction to 1959, during the Khrushchev era, yet the architectural design, thick double walls, negative pressure seals, and internal decontamination corridors suggested a purpose beyond conventional research. The Russian Academy of Sciences dispatched a multidisciplinary team led by epidemiologist Dr. Anna Kovalenko. On arrival, the team discovered a sealed hatchway under layers of ice, welded shut from the outside. Once opened, the interior revealed intact laboratories, faded signage reading Programmer Ryzenko, and racks of corroded vials labeled only with alphanumeric codes. The atmosphere was heavy with the chemical odor of formalin and decay. In one corner, a rusted plaque bore a date, August 1962. Everything inside had been frozen in time. Equipment, documents, even meal trays left mid-use. Over the following weeks, archival research in Moscow unearthed several declassified references to Facility 74 in Ministry of Health memoranda dated 1961-63. The documents, stamped «Совершенно секретно», top secret, described pathogenic viability trials and psychophysiological endurance assessments conducted on non-voluntary subjects. The term non-voluntary was later crossed out in red pencil. According to a 1964 memo signed by Colonel P. Ryzenko, the program was terminated after an incident described only as Loss Event 9. No records of the personnel involved survived. Rumors persisted in Cold War intelligence circles that Soviet researchers had attempted to develop a biological deterrent capable of surviving subarctic deployment, essentially, a pathogen designed for the environment of Siberia itself. Dr. Kovalenko's team catalogued over 4,000 physical artifacts. Many were mundane, lab coats, centrifuge casings, storage drums, but others defied explanation. A series of sealed aluminum canisters contained samples still active at low temperatures. Genetic sequencing performed in Magadan identified fragments of bacillus strains modified through early plasmid insertion techniques, decades before Western genetic engineering achieved the same precision. When the discovery reached Moscow, oversight was transferred to the Federal Security Service. The research logs, once accessible to Kovalenko's team, were suddenly redacted. 1 week later, 2 of her assistants were detained on charges of unauthorized data transmission. The Kolyma site was reclassified as a strategic heritage zone and sealed under military guard. Through leaked copies of internal FSB communications obtained by journalists from Novaya Zemlya, fragments of a buried operation began to emerge. Codenamed the Kolyma Protocol, it appeared to involve collaboration between Soviet biologists and East German chemists in the early 1960s. The stated objective to produce an agent capable of incapacitating populations without destruction of infrastructure. However, a secondary directive, labeled Z Directive 13, ordered that all human testing data be destroyed upon project completion. It never was. Inside a locked cabinet, researchers found 35mm reels showing test chambers filled with volunteers in military uniforms, their breath crystallizing in the freezing air. The footage ends abruptly, but the audio log continued, coughing, orders in Russian, then silence. By cross-referencing Soviet Defense Ministry records with local census archives, investigators identified several names from the logs: men and women sentenced under Article 58, political prisoners sent to the Gulag. Their families were told they died of pneumonia. The truth was far more deliberate. Subsequent interviews with descendants revealed that some had received mysterious compensation payments in the early 1990s during Yeltsin's declassification wave. The payment forms bore a notation: Program Rehabilitation, Kolyma Sector. No explanation accompanied them. As word spread, Russian state media dismissed the findings as foreign disinformation, yet independent archivists confirmed the authenticity of the stamps and signatures. The official narrative began to fracture. In 2020, an international research coalition under the Geneva Convention's Historical Forensics Initiative requested limited access to the site. Moscow granted permission under strict supervision. What they found confirmed the worst suspicions. Deep in the lowest level of the structure lay a chamber labeled Block 4, Izolatia. Inside, 27 sealed containment pods were arranged in a semicircle, each labeled with numerical codes and initials. One bore the inscription ANK, believed to be the project's chief scientist, Anatoly N. Kovrikov, who disappeared in 1962. Within one of the pods, forensic teams found skeletal remains wrapped in protective clothing, a syringe still clutched in the left hand. The radiation badge attached to the suit read Exposure Level 6. Analysis indicated the presence of isotopes used in sterilization experiments. It was not merely a bioweapon test site. It was a grave. Parallel to the discovery, a set of typed transcripts surfaced from former KGB archivist Viktor Melyukov, who had fled to Finland in the 1990s. Among his belongings were 3 microfilm reels labeled Ryzenko Archive Delta. The documents described the final days of the program. On July 17, 1962, an emergency message was transmitted from Object 74 to the Central Committee. Containment compromised. Protocol Epsilon engaged. All communications ceased afterward. The following month, a train manifest recorded the arrival of classified biological materials at Vladivostok port, destination unknown. No further trace of those materials has ever been found. In 2023, after renewed media scrutiny, the Russian government released a carefully edited statement acknowledging the existence of a Cold War-era research installation in Magadan, Oblast. The statement emphasized that no human experimentation has been substantiated, yet internal UN reports leaked shortly thereafter revealed that samples taken from the Kolyma site contained strains genetically identical to pathogens, weaponized in later conflicts, including Vietnam and Afghanistan. The link was undeniable. The so-called Kolyma Protocol had not ended in 1962. Its research had simply migrated, adopted by successive regimes and adapted to new purposes. Today, the site remains sealed under snow and ice, its coordinates removed from modern maps. The official archive, labeled File 2317K, was transferred to a classified repository near Novosibirsk, accessible only by ministerial order. Forensic photographs from the initial excavation show hallways lined with frost-coated glass doors, warning labels barely visible beneath layers of rime. On one door, a single phrase remains legible: Never skravat, do not open. Dr. Kovalenko, now living under protection abroad, summarized the discovery in one chilling line recorded for a documentary that was never aired. What we found in Kolyma was not a relic of the Cold War. It was evidence that the war never really ended. Chapter 3. Project Seafire, the Submerged Archive. The North Sea is littered with wrecks, merchant ships, destroyers, submarines, but few hold secrets more guarded than the British trawler HMS Larkspur II, lost under classified circumstances in 1946. For decades, divers catalogued it as another wartime casualty. That changed in 2019, when a salvage expedition from the University of St Andrews stumbled upon a second hull buried beneath it. The sonar scan showed a compact, reinforced compartment welded to the seabed, accessible only through a pressure-sealed hatch. The coordinates, 58 Hartdegrei 547 N, 3°921W, placed it squarely within Scapa Flow, a graveyard of the Royal Navy's wartime fleet. The find was logged as anomalous submerged structure. Within weeks, British defence historians realised what they had uncovered. The chamber belonged to Project Seafire, a programme long rumoured and longer denied. Once raised and stabilised, the chamber's exterior revealed remnants of serial markings. XCOM-4, Admiralty Experimental Command Unit. Inside, corrosion had spared an inner compartment. Airtight, insulated, and inexplicably dry. Lined along its walls were waterproof containers bearing the Union Jack and the designation Directive 91A, Classified Disposal. 1946. Each container was welded shut, but one had split along a seam, revealing the corner of a blueprint preserved by the salt-resistant resin. It showed schematics for a torpedo-shaped drone marked Unmanned Autonomous Craft Model XF3, dated 1945. The plans predated known development of remotely operated vehicles by more than a decade. The accompanying notations bore signatures from both Royal Navy engineers and US Naval Attaché officers. The collaboration suggested a secret post-war alliance between British and American engineers, an operation that quietly bridged wartime rivalry into Cold War innovation. When the recovered materials reached the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL, in Porton Down, researchers were stunned. Metallurgical testing showed alloys, consistent with experimental marine composites introduced only in the early 1960s. Yet, the documentation clearly placed their origin in 1945. Even more curious were marginal notes written in US technical shorthand, references to Phase 2 propulsion tests, Key West facility. The implication was unmistakable. Prototype components built in Britain had been transferred to American naval bases for continued testing. The transfer had occurred months before Operation Paperclip began, indicating that technological exchange between the Allies had started before Germany's official surrender. It also meant that Seafire's prototypes had been deliberately erased from post-war records, hidden beneath a layer of plausible deniability and saltwater. Historical cross-referencing revealed a trail of inconsistencies. In March 1946, the Admiralty issued Disposal, Directive 91A, ordering the scuttling of sensitive research material related to underwater, propulsion and remote navigation. The disposal site matched Scapa Flow. The order was signed by Rear Admiral John S. Croswell, whose post-war career abruptly ended that same year. His personnel file, later declassified under the 30-year rule, contained a single redacted note: involvement with unauthorized disposal of classified assets. Inquiry suspended. 1947. For decades, the directive vanished from official indexes until the rediscovery of the Seafire Vault made its reappearance unavoidable. The buried chamber was not simply a dumping ground, it was a time capsule, deliberately sealed to prevent its contents from falling into foreign hands. Among the recovered artifacts was a journal belonging to Lieutenant Commander Arthur Dane, a naval engineer attached to Experimental Command Unit 4. His entries, though partially water damaged, offered an inside view. In one passage dated February 1945, Dane wrote, "Project Seafire has entered the automation phase. The device functions without manual control, responding to radio pulse guidance. Admiralty considers operational deployment within the year." Later entries darkened in tone. By April, he described an incident during a sea trial. Unit malfunction, propulsion runaway, lost contact, explosion off Hoy, recovery impossible. 3 days later, he noted that US officers had taken control of the project. The final entry read only, "Directive issued, burn all test logs, scuttle if necessary." Dane's body was never found. Naval records list him as lost at sea. The significance of the Seafire discovery extended beyond technology. Embedded within one of the steel cases were photographic negatives depicting a workshop interior lined with both British and American flags. Men in lab coats posed beside a sleek metallic fuselage, half the size of a midget submarine. A chalkboard behind them bore a single phrase: Seafire, Phase 3. When historians compared the image to later photos of early Cold War reconnaissance drones, the resemblance was unmistakable. The lineage from Seafire to Cold War surveillance craft was direct and deliberate. Within the microfilm canisters, several memos referenced Project Vesper, a transatlantic intelligence collaboration preceding NATO's official formation. The program's goal was the creation of self-guided oceanic surveillance platforms, essentially underwater drones capable of monitoring Soviet naval routes without detection. The deeper analysts dug, the more the operation blurred lines between scientific innovation and geopolitical deception. One classified memorandum recovered from the archive, dated July 1945, read, "Upon termination of hostilities, transfer Seafire schematics to US Office of Naval Research under cover of mutual exchange. Maintain British origin secrecy. Public denial mandatory." The cooperation prefigured decades of joint development cloaked in silence. When investigative journalists attempted to confirm Seafire's existence in British archives, they were told no such project had ever existed. Yet cross-referenced US Navy records contained references to Marine Drone Experiment XF-3, Oregon's British design. The dual denial confirmed the obvious. Both nations had participated, and both had buried it. In late 2020, the recovered archive was moved to an undisclosed MOD facility for restoration. Photographs leaked by a whistleblower known only as Archer revealed documents stamped "Secret, Admiralty Eyes Only." Among them was a letter from Winston Churchill, dated March 10, 1945, addressed to the First Sea Lord. The Americans are eager to advance the Seafire initiative, ensure continuity of research under mutual discretion. The device must not fall into Soviet hands. Historians who reviewed the document noted the Prime Minister's handwriting matched verified samples. If authentic, the letter implied Churchill himself sanctioned a covert joint operation that would survive well into the Cold War. It also suggested that by 1945, Allied leaders anticipated not just the end of one war, but the beginning of another. By 2023, the Seafire archive had been fully digitized under the codename Recovery Project ALBA. The contents included over 1,200 pages of schematics, operational logs, and photographs. Among them, analysts identified recurring references to Seafire 6, an iteration described as self-correcting, capable of deep-sea endurance beyond 30 hours. This model, curiously, never appeared in official Royal Navy records. However, in 1952, US Navy documents referenced tests of an unmanned vehicle codenamed Hydra off the Florida coast. Performance specifications identical to Seafire 6. The link between the two was irrefutable. The missing leap in technology that defined early American underwater drones had originated not in US labs, but in a secret British wartime bunker. Despite overwhelming evidence, official acknowledgement remains absent. The British government maintains that no record of Project Seafire exists within MOD archives. Public inquiry requests filed under the Freedom of Information Act have been repeatedly denied on grounds of national security. Yet the divers who first entered the submerged chamber recall the eerie silence below, the cold geometry of the vault, and the unmistakable stenciling of the words Seafire 1946 across the bulkhead. The steel plates had been cut and welded with military precision, not by accident, but by intent. It was a burial at sea, executed to preserve a secret that bridged two wars and birthed an age of unseen machines. Today, the Scarpa flow site lies once again beneath the waves, resealed after forensic extraction. The official documentation remains classified as ALBA 17C. But for those who have seen the images, the realization is clear. The technology that shaped modern naval warfare was not born from peacetime innovation, but from a single chamber entombed in saltwater. In the stillness of the North Sea, among the wrecks of empires, Project Seafire continues to whisper its history, one that began in secrecy, drowned in silence, and rose again with the tide. Chapter 4: Echoes of Operation Nighthold. In February 2024, a routine digitization project inside the US National Security Agency's Cold War archives produced an anomaly: a misfiled magnetic reel labeled ECL-09 Berlin. At first glance, it appeared to be ordinary encrypted transmissions from 1952, yet the metadata attached to the file carried a forgotten designation: OP Nighthold. That name did not exist in any official declassification index. Within hours, internal security flagged the file, but not before a contractor working the project copied the data. Weeks later, an encrypted copy reached an independent intelligence historian named Dr. Elise Hartman. When Hartman decrypted the contents using reconstructed cipher keys from the early NSA SIGINT systems, she uncovered a series of field transmissions between American and West German agents operating in post-war Berlin. The messages referenced tunnel infiltration, asset retrieval, and Black Cross delivered. It was the first documented trace of Operation Nighthold, an intelligence program buried beneath decades of Cold War secrecy. To understand Nighthold's origin, Hartmann traced the transmissions back to their geographical source. The Tempelhof sector of West Berlin, a site honeycombed with abandoned Wehrmacht tunnels left from the war. According to US Army Corps blueprints, Several passages extended eastward beneath Soviet-occupied territory. Contemporary military records had insisted they were collapsed after 1945, but the transmissions contradicted that. One message dated 17th of April 1952 referenced safe passage through Tunnel 5B, contact at Junction Theta. The recipient was identified by call sign ALDA. Subsequent research revealed ALDA was the codename of a CIA field officer stationed in Berlin under diplomatic cover. The transmissions also referred to archive retrieval, specifically SS Tech Div, priority crates. If true, the operation's purpose was not espionage against the Soviets, but the extraction of Nazi intelligence archives before the USSR could claim them. Hartman's findings were corroborated when she accessed partially declassified NATO files labeled 3235 Alpha, which mentioned a joint Western intelligence recovery operation, Berlin Sector, 1952-53. However, all personnel records for the mission were sealed indefinitely. Through persistence and archival cross-matching, Hartman discovered a single surviving operative, former Bundesnachrichtendienst technician Otto Kell, then 96 years old, living in Hamburg. In an interview conducted in July 2024, Kell recalled being assigned to maintain radio relay equipment under Anglo-American supervision. He described long nights in a subterranean command post, coded transmissions sent via portable transceivers, and the sound of drilling far below. When shown photographs of Tempelhof's sublevels, Kell pointed to one corridor and said softly, "That's where they went down." Nighthold started there. Further analysis of the decrypted logs painted a chilling picture. The operation's objective was to retrieve containers hidden by the SS Technical Branch in April 1945, archives believed to contain experimental radar schematics, anti-interference systems, and classified communications encryption devices. Intelligence historians had long speculated that much of the West's early radar countermeasure technology came from captured German research, but direct proof was missing. The Nighthold logs provided that proof. One transcript referenced Relic Package 7B secured. Departure via Tunnel 5B. The communication abruptly ended 30 minutes later. The next recorded signal was a distress transmission. East breach, loss of contact, containment compromised. The log then went silent. No official mission termination record followed. In intelligence lexicon, that meant the operation had been scrubbed, its existence denied, its participants erased. Digging deeper, Hartman uncovered evidence that the British SIS, Secret Intelligence Service, had also participated. A 1953 memorandum from MI6 Station Berlin, file code BDE 42N, referenced joint operations with US counterparts regarding technical asset retrieval. It contained a single line that was later heavily redacted. Further dissemination of Nighthold materials prohibited under NATO secrecy clause. That clause remained active well into the 1990s. The discovery linked Nighthold not only to the US and West German agencies, but also to British intelligence, a trinational mission buried beneath Cold War bureaucracy. However, an even more disturbing connection emerged. One decrypted message contained the words, SS archive recovered, biological data included, forward to Langley. If authentic, it suggested the operation may have recovered human experimentation data, information banned under international law. When Hartman attempted to verify that transmission through US Freedom of Information requests, the NSA refused, citing foreign origin intelligence still relevant to ongoing operations. That phrase, standard for sensitive materials, implied that some of Nighthold's findings still informed classified research today. Her inquiries were soon followed by subtle warnings. Anonymous emails advising her to discontinue analysis for personal safety. She ignored them. In October 2024, she presented her findings at a closed symposium in Zurich, attended by journalists and historians. Hours after her talk, her laptop was stolen. Surveillance footage showed an unidentified man in a grey overcoat removing the device and exiting through a service corridor. The Zurich police later reported that the hard drive was completely wiped. Unwilling to surrender the truth, Hartman reconstructed her data from cloud backups and returned to the decrypted transmissions. The final log sequence, labeled Nighthold Phase 4, contained coordinates, placing the extraction point beneath the Spree River near the Reichstag's ruins. The last message read, "All relic containers sealed. Proceeding west. Tunnel collapse imminent." Archaeological surveys conducted after German reunification confirmed evidence of a tunnel collapse in that exact area, dating to the early 1950s. The physical trace of Neithold's last moments remained beneath modern Berlin. Hartmann proposed a joint excavation, but German authorities denied permission, citing infrastructure safety risks. Yet independent engineers who studied the site's ground-penetrating radar scans identified metallic objects embedded 20 meters below, consistent with sealed steel crates. Through her contacts in the Bundesarchiv, Hartmann eventually obtained a scanned photograph taken in 1952. 4 men in field uniforms, their insignia obscured, standing beside a steel container labeled Relic 7B. Behind them, a brick archway partially collapsed into shadow. On the back of the photo, handwritten in pencil, were the words, "Black Cross delivered." She recognized the phrase from the transmissions, the code indicating mission completion. Black Cross was likely the SS codename for their classified archive network, which Neithold had sought to retrieve. The implication was staggering. By 1952, Western intelligence had in its possession complete SS research archives, including data on radar countermeasures, encrypted communications, and possibly human experimentation. None of it ever appeared in post-war disclosures. It had been buried under the auspices of Cold War necessity. By late 2024, the Neithold investigation had gained international traction. Independent journalists traced links between the operation's recovered materials and later technological leaps in NATO electronic warfare capabilities. A 1954 CIA memorandum titled Relic Transfer Report Langley confirmed receipt of sealed assets from Berlin, marked for technical integration. The report was never released to the public. When contacted for comment, the CIA issued a statement. "We do not comment on historical intelligence matters." But one former agency analyst, speaking anonymously, remarked, "You're looking at the origin of our signal interception superiority. What we took from them changed the entire landscape." The final twist came when Hartmann uncovered a peculiar pattern in the Neithold transmissions, an embedded secondary encryption layer. Decoded, it revealed fragments of text referencing Operation Eclipse, asset alignment. The connection to the Castle Vault was undeniable. The two operations, though separated by years and nations, shared overlapping personnel and objectives: to extract forbidden technology before it could vanish or fall into enemy hands. Eclipse was the prototype. Neithold was the continuation. Together, they formed a chain of custody linking Nazi research to the Western intelligence apparatus that defined the Cold War. In her final recorded interview before withdrawing from public life, Dr. Hartmann stated, "Operation Neithold proves that history doesn't fade. It's archived, classified, and forgotten on purpose. What began in the tunnels of Berlin still echoes in every encrypted transmission we send today." Her words lingered like static over an open frequency. Somewhere beneath the streets of modern Berlin, sealed in darkness, the relics of 2 wars and 1 covert alliance remain entombed. Silent witnesses to an age that never truly ended. Chapter 5: The Lost Laboratory of Unit 731B. In March 2022, a group of Japanese geologists surveying an abandoned mining tunnel near Mudanjiang, northeastern China, encountered a sealed iron door at the terminus of a shaft long dismissed as a wartime drainage passage. Behind it lay a tunnel complex extending over 400 meters, reinforced with concrete and containing remnants of ventilation systems and overhead rail lines. The site matched no known Imperial Japanese Army records. On the wall near the entrance, faded kanji spelled Dai 731 Yi Bu, Unit 731B. The discovery was immediately reported to both Chinese and Japanese authorities. Within weeks, a joint forensic investigation commenced under strict secrecy. What they uncovered suggested that one of history's darkest military research programs had not ended in 1945, as the world believed, but had continued, quietly and illicitly, well into the post-war years. The primary chamber contained dozens of medical tables arranged in precise rows, each fitted with rusted restraints, glass jars labeled with handwritten characters: Fei Zuji, lung tissue, Pai Zhang, spleen, lined the shelves. Some jars were intact, their contents preserved by the freezing temperatures that had sealed the complex for nearly 8 decades. Among them researchers found documents bearing the official stamp of the Kwantung Army's Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department, the parent unit of the infamous Unit 731. The papers were dated between 1946 and 1948, years after Japan's surrender. At the bottom of one file, typed in English on an American typewriter, was a single phrase, transferred under Harvest Protocol. It was the first evidence suggesting coordination with foreign intelligence services, possibly the US occupation authorities who, as declassified post-war documents revealed, had granted immunity to Unit 731's senior scientists in exchange for their research data. Forensic analysts catalogued over 18,000 individual items: syringes, vials, surgical tools, film reels, and coded ledgers. Many carried the initials TM or HN, later linked to Dr. Toshio Mura and Dr. Hideo Nakagawa, mid-ranking physicians who had vanished in 1945, presumed executed by Soviet forces. Yet newly uncovered Imperial Army personnel, lists found in the National Institute for Defense, studies archives revealed that both men had been reactivated under civilian identities in 1947 as consultants to the US Occupation Medical Corps in Tokyo. Cross-referencing these names with American archives, unearthed a file marked Project Harvest, Personnel Intégration, Far East, authorized by the US Army Chemical Corps. The program's goal: assimilation of Japanese and German biomedical expertise into Allied research frameworks. Evidence now suggests Unit 731B was reconstituted under this directive, operating in remote Manchurian tunnels, repurposed as a clandestine continuation of biological warfare experiments. Inside the second chamber, investigators discovered a partially collapsed archive room filled with carbonized folders and degraded microfilm reels. When digitally restored, the reels revealed photographic sequences showing human subjects confined in isolation cells, their skin marked with tags reading Test Group 9B, Aerosol Trials. Temperature and humidity data scribbled on the walls indicated environmental manipulation studies, likely to assess airborne contagion viability. Among the recovered documents was an English-language field report stamped Harvest 731B was Sample Behavior, Viral Dispersion Trial. It bore an American military header, U.S. Biological Research Division, Yokosuka Liaison Office, 1947. The implications were catastrophic. These were not residual Japanese documents. They were joint operational records created after Japan's surrender, indicating post-war collaboration in direct violation of the Geneva Conventions. When the findings were leaked to international media in late 2022, both governments issued terse denials. Tokyo described the discovery as a misidentification of wartime detritus. Beijing accused Japan of obstructing access to archival evidence. Yet independent DNA analysis conducted by the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences confirmed that the preserved tissue samples contained both Japanese and Chinese genetic markers. More damningly, carbon-14 dating established that some specimens were less than 80 years old, collected as late as 1947. The Chinese government demanded full disclosure from Japan and the United States regarding post-surrender biomedical activities under Operation Harvest. Washington remained silent. Declassified Pentagon memos from 1948 later revealed that East Asia medical field assets were exempt from war crimes prosecution due to their strategic intelligence value. The exemption directly corresponded with the timeline of 731B's activity. Further complicating matters, researchers identified several crates stamped with the seal of the US Army Quartermaster Corps. Their shipping manifests, cross-referenced with Yokohama port logs, listed contents as medical preservation equipment, destination, Dairen Zone. Each entry bore the code HP731B. In the years following Japan's surrender, Dairen was under joint Soviet and Chinese administration, meaning that American shipments could have only reached the site through covert logistical channels. Within one crate, a partially intact film reel showed what appeared to be aerial footage of the Mudanjiang tunnel complex, filmed from a reconnaissance plane in 1947. The footage proved that the Allies were aware of, and likely overseeing, the facility's continued operation. The investigation took a darker turn when a sealed compartment was discovered beneath the laboratory floor. Inside were dozens of small hermetically sealed containers labeled VAROB 9B, Typho X2, and Phage H7. laboratory analysis confirmed viable traces of engineered bacterial strains. The pathogens exhibited genetic modifications beyond the documented capabilities of 1940s microbiology, evidence of advanced experimentation, integrating knowledge from multiple scientific traditions. When this information surfaced in classified briefings, health ministries across East Asia quietly conducted contamination sweeps in regions near the former site. No public acknowledgement followed. Within months, Chinese authorities filled the tunnels with concrete and flooded the surrounding passages. Officially, the purpose was environmental containment. Unofficially, it was erasure. In early 2023, fragments of the 731B archive reached journalists through an anonymous intermediary within Japan's Ministry of Health. Among the leaked materials was a memo dated November 12, 1948, titled Report on Aerogenic Transmission Potential. The author was identified as Major Henry Alcott, U.S. Army Chemical Corps Liaison. In it, Alcott described cross-disciplinary results achieved through Japanese protocols previously deemed unethical but scientifically invaluable. The language was clinical, detached, an admission without remorse. Alcott's name later appeared in a 1952 declassified document relating to the Fort Detrick biowarfare program. His report's phrasing echoed earlier Japanese terminology, confirming that methodologies from Unit 731 had been incorporated into American research infrastructure. The horror of wartime atrocity had been laundered through the bureaucracy of scientific advancement. Public outrage followed, but the truth soon blurred under political pressure. In Japan, the Diet debated the findings, yet no formal inquiry materialized. In Washington, congressional aides denied any record of Project Harvest. In Beijing, the state produced a documentary titled Frozen Crimes: The Legacy of 731B, which was abruptly removed from circulation weeks later. The Joint Investigative Task Force disbanded in early 2024. Many of the physical samples were destroyed under biohazard protocol, though independent archivists claim several specimens were transferred to undisclosed storage in Harbin. The final official report, Investigation Summary, Mudanjiang Site, Case File CHN-JPN 731B 2022, concluded with a single ambiguous line. Evidence indicates extended post-war research collaboration between imperial remnants and occupying authorities, political implications beyond current scope. For historians, the Mudanjiang discovery reshaped the narrative of post-war justice. The assumption that war crimes trials had closed the book on biological warfare research was false. Instead, Operation Harvest and Unit 731B revealed a continuity of secrecy, a convergence of defeated and victorious powers in pursuit of scientific dominance. Every atrocity recorded in those tunnels was preserved not by ideology, but by utility. The data, as one investigator put it, was too valuable to destroy, too shameful to admit. Today, the site is sealed, guarded by local security forces under the guise of environmental protection. The area remains off-limits, its coordinates removed from public maps. Occasionally, hikers report faint metallic hums emanating from beneath the earth after heavy rainfall. Officials dismiss it as groundwater movement, but for those who handled the evidence, that sound carries a different meaning. A reminder that beneath the concrete and the silence, a fragment of Unit 731B still exists. The war never ended in Mudanjiang. It simply changed its uniform.